will be, this is Paul Torlap. I'm emceeing this event, and this is the Prince William Sound Natural History Symposium on a beautiful sunny day here in Anchorage, at least. We will be back in a few minutes. We'll start up here with Scott in about a minute. We might as well go ahead and get started. So it's my pleasure to introduce Scott Pegau. He's with the Prince William Sound Science Center, and he's going to be talking to us about, and he's the research scientist and program manager, and we'll be talking about the Prince William Sound Science Center mission and long-term monitoring programs. So welcome, Scott.
Thank you. Let me get my window selected. Share my screen. Well, I want to actually start by thanking Willow and Allison for doing such a great job reminding us of the importance of the land acknowledgement, and acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the traditional lands of the Yak people. The acknowledgement is in appreciation for their post and present stewardships of the land. How do I make sure the screens? With that, I would like to present on some of the long-term monitoring work that's going on in Prince William Sound. This is definitely not all of the work that's being conducted. As was said, my name's Scott Pegau. I work for the Oil Spill Recovery Institute, which was formed under the Oil Pollution Act of 1990. We're housed inside the Prince William Sound Science Center. And I also coordinate a herring research and monitoring program that's underway. The subjects I do want to touch base on today is just briefly about the Prince William Sound Science Center itself. Go in and talk about the herring research and monitoring efforts, what we're learning there, and then talk about Gulf Watch Alaska, which is a larger ecosystem monitoring program. So starting with the Science Center, we were formed in 1989. We formed after the Exxon Valdez oil spill, but the process of getting formed actually began 2 years prior to that. The planning work had been underway when the Exxon Valdez went aground and had the major oil spill. So a lot of people associate us with the oil spill, but we were actually working to be underway before then. We are a research and education organization. As a researcher, I will be a little bit biased towards the research side of our work because I'm more familiar with all the different aspects. I will touch base on the education as well. So on the research side, our foci to date it's been heavily towards the oceanography, work with seabirds, work with fish, but we're definitely looking to expand the work that we're doing. And part of that expansion is the development of a new facility that's being built. The ground is clear, and they're supposed to be starting to put the fill back in so that they can lay the foundation. It's going to have our labs, offices, education space, and storage. So we're trying to go from about 9 different locations around town into one. It's going to be out at Fleming Spit. Most people would know it better as Hippie Cove. We expect to be in the building in the summer of 2022. Provided that everything goes on schedule. And so this is a diagram of the building as it's envisioned right now. For those of you out in Prince William Sound, not in Cordova, and you're trying to see if you can see us, one of the more distinct ways is if you happen to see our research special, the New Wave. It's out there fairly often doing oceanographic surveys and is it travels around Prince William Sound regularly throughout the summer. Some of the types of work that we've done, we're just finishing up a large project for Alaska Department of Fish and Game, where we're looking at hatchery wild salmon interaction. So what's pictured here is a collection of otoliths from pink salmon in Prince William Sound. Alaska Department of Fish and Game, and then use the information to look at straying rates, and to they did genetics for several generations to see how the genetics affected the viability of the salmon returning into Prince William Sound. Another thing that's out there fairly often is this automated profiler. You see Naked Island in the background. This profiler collects a lot of information about oceanography, from temperature, nutrients, plankton. So Rob has his hands on a holographic camera that takes images of the zooplankton and phytoplankton that are in, micron type size. This profiler normally is about 150 feet, but twice a day it comes up to the surface and sends out information, collects data along the way. So there is a chance that if you are to the southeast of Naked Island, you may see a flag stick out of the water for a short time every once in a while. And that's this automated profiler, and it gives us a lot of very detailed information about what's happening in Prince William Sound. As far as some of the seabird work, one of the projects that we're doing, it looks at avian influenza. So looking for strains of influenza that are being carried over in the birds, looking for potential spread of diseases through that way. There are a lot of other research projects that are underway or we have done in the recent past, and definitely encourage you to come to our website if you want to learn more about those. Our education programs, it's a mix of classroom activities, work within the grade and high school here at Cordova. There are some trips out as well to other schools to engage with other places. We have camps that are underway. In fact, the first camp started today, and this is generally for elementary and middle school students. There is one high school program. Some are day camps where the campers are only with us for 8 hours and then we return them to the families. Sometimes we do overnight camps where the students stay at our facilities near the airport overnight while doing the camps. We also support festivals, do activities during those. So my first quiz, and we get to see how this works. Betsy, if you don't mind, this will be a poll. If you visit in 2023, where will you find the Prince William Sound Science Center? And I see there is a poll tab for you to answer.
Well, Scott, we've got, according to my side of things, we've got almost 80 people live right now, and about 13 votes have come in. So just folks, if you can't find it, look down below where you see Scott and his slides. There's the polls right there, and if you click that, that'll pull up the first quiz. And do go and find that, because there's going to be a couple more that Scott got and our other presenters throughout the day as well. But so far we've got 9 votes for number 2 and 3 votes for number 6. So up to 10 votes for 2, 3 votes, 6 votes for number 3. We've got 0 votes for number 1.
Yeah. So there isn't any town names. It's, you're looking at a map that has a picture of Cordova, or aerial picture of Cordova, and 3 locations there. So we're staying in Cordova, so that's why there's no towns listed.
Some folks must have felt bad for number 1. We've got a couple of votes there now. Let me know when you want the final count.
I can see it live now.
Oh, great. Okay, then you don't need me.
Yeah, I'll just give it a few more seconds and keep moving so we stay on time. So in this, the correct answer is Site 2. That's where we will be moving to. Site 1 is where the Science Center is currently located. So if you come to Cordova and you want to find the Science Center now, it is quite literally in the mouth of the harbor. There's a building at the end of the dock right at the mouth of the harbor, and that's where the Science Center is. And 3 is where I'm speaking to you from in our work from home kind of status that we are currently in. So 2 is the correct answer. We're moving out here. So the ferry terminal is here, and we're going to move out to this area, which is called Hippie Cove. And with that, I'm going to transition over into the 2 long-term research and monitoring programs I want to present today. They're both funded by the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council, and need to give the disclaimer that these findings and conclusions are presented by the authors, that are, these are our own and do not necessarily reflect the views or position of the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council. With that, the Herring Research and Monitoring Program is actually one that started 12 years ago now, I believe. It was developed under the guidance of the communities around Prince William Sound. It was identified as a very important subject because of herring's importance to both economics and the ecology of the region. And so the program's goals is to help understand why herring are not recovering in Prince William Sound. For more information about this program, if you go to the Prince William Sound Science Center's website, which is this pwssc.org, there's a research tab, and then there's a way to sort for herring, and you'll see a lot more types of projects than I'm going to present on today. The pictures along the bottom just represent some of the different types of activities that I am going to touch base on. So with the herring program, the start of it is looking at the aerial spawn surveys. This is what the Fish and Game has been collecting for a long time. Without a fishery, though, they didn't have the funding to maintain it. So the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council has been supporting this set of surveys, and these are really critical because this is the primary information for us to judge how the population is changing. And what we're looking for is the water turning white, and that's a sure sign of spawn. We also try to use new technologies, and so a couple of things that are here. This picture is a satellite image of Rocky Bay and a section of spawn that we actually didn't catch by aerial survey. So using satellites to the best of our ability. to go looking. And if you want a free place to just play around looking at high resolution satellite imagery, if you look up Sentinel Playground, you'll get to this site. Another important thing for us is this year we launched a Facebook page called Prince William Sound Herring Watch. So we are sharing all of the information as it was being collected, so that people would know where fish were being observed, which was useful for the subsistence users, both from Cordova and Tititlic. Next thing that we do is we collect fish. We do it to determine their age, sex, and size, and we also sample for disease. So pictured here is cast net collection. We have them lined up after doing length and weight measurements, and we collect the blood, spin it for disease, because diseases are believed to be primary means of some of the collapses that have occurred. So we're trying to track those diseases through time. We also do acoustic surveys, so it provides a second measure of how many fish are out there. So we tow a fin that has a very fancy version of a fish finder on it, and use that to determine the biomass of fish that are out there. Using the Prince William Sound Regional Citizens Advisory Council's funding, we are continuing to do aerial forage fish surveys, and from these forage fish surveys, what we do is estimate the number of age 1 herring that are in the sound, which is important because they don't spawn till they turn age 3. So we don't see the fish until they're 3 years old. So we don't know what might happen in the future. And by doing these forage fish surveys, it gives us a glimpse of what might be coming in the future. So if you see a red and white aircraft on floats flying the entire coastline of Prince William Sound over the next month, it's every June we've been flying and looking for schools of fish. And so these black dots are basically what we're looking for, and we're counting them. We determine herring, sandlance, capelin, eulachon, and we try to age the herring at least to age 1 or age 2 or older. We use all of that information and put it into a model to give us the population estimate. So what's pictured here is the trend over time. The black bars are the acoustic estimates of the biomass. The colors are the confidence intervals. So the 95% is dark, 90%, and 50%. But we also use that model to look at what might be driving some of these changes. And so pictured here on the right is mortality effects, and we have it broken into many years. And it's important because this collapse that occurred in the early 1990s can drive some spurious relationships. So we want to make sure it's not only picking up what caused or might be correlated to the collapse, but what's correlated to the more recent years. And so yellow and pink are important. And if the curve is completely away from the 0 line, it means that on the right it increases mortality, and on the left it decreases mortality. So you can see things like the more walleye pollock, actually the lower the herring mortality, which may seem counterintuitive, but pollock also act as what we call a prey shelter. Pollock can be easier to catch than herring, and so a lot of the predators will shift from herring over to pollock if they are present. Arrowtooth flounders, whales, These PDO is the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, and NPGO is North Pacific Gyre Oscillation. They're both large-scale physical indices that just give us an idea of what's happening in the ocean. We also have a lot of other projects. One that we've been doing the last several years is tagging fish. So we've been implanting an acoustic pinger essentially in each of the fish, and then we have acoustic arrays that listen for these fish to pass overhead. We have them near the spawning grounds and near the entrances. So what we're able to do is see how many of the fish stay in Prince William Sound, how many of them leave Prince William Sound, and how long they stay out. So most of the fish, right after they spawn, they leave. Quite a few of them like to stay down at the southern end of Montague Island till about late June, early July. Then they seem to go out into the Gulf of Alaska and start reappearing in Prince William Sound in September. So with that, Betsy, if we can do the next poll. Here's one I didn't touch base on, just kind of the curiosity. How are herring aged in Prince William Sound? Are we using their otoliths, the length of the fish, their scales, or fin rays? Can give you about 30 seconds and we'll... It doesn't look like people are overly brave at voting on something I didn't cover.
The good news is votes are anonymous.
Yeah.
Take a stab at it, folks.
Well, it looks like answering is slowed down a little bit, so I will move on. So the correct answer here is scales. Actually, all four of these techniques are used to age fish, different types of fish. Otoliths are fairly common, but a scale is much easier to collect and age than an otolith. We've been doing it since the 70s, so there's a huge scale library that Alaska Department of Fish and Game maintains. And what's pictured here is basically what that scale looks like, and we're reading it like a tree, looking for the winter time periods where there's very little growth, leaves this kind of dense annulus. So that's a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old. And then you have your typical problems of some years, it looks like this fish was still growing a little bit through the winter, and it's hard to see that annulus, but that's where a 3-year-old and 4-year-old. The other long-term monitoring program that I wanted to briefly touch base on is called Gulf Watch Alaska. It's a long-term ecosystem monitoring program. So it covers everything from physics to whales, with a goal of providing sound scientific data, providing products that help inform both users of the area and the management area agencies involved in the area throughout the Gulf of Alaska, with several different objectives to the program. And again, pictures on the bottom represent some of the things that are being monitored by this program. So the long-term picture of the Gulf Watch Alaska is it's funded by the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council, and they wanted to build off of existing monitoring programs to provide a long-term data record to help understand not only the impacts of the oil spill and the recovery from the oil spill, but put that into context of both short-term and long-term variability in the ecosystem. So on the timeline here on the bottom, you see a couple large events, the oil spill, the Exxon Valdez oil spill. The blob is what the warm water from 2014 to 2016 is commonly referred to. It was a hot water blob. Up here are some of the programs that have been monitoring and when they began. 2012 is the start of this program, so all of the components within the Gulf Watch Alaska started by 2012, and the expectation is that it would go to 2032. So it provides a huge amount of information available for the context. And also on the bottom, you can see there is gradual warming that's occurring, and so we need to account for that as well. It's an integrated program, so what it's looking at is it has a program management team that has different coordinating committees, but it then drops down into 4 components: the environmental drivers, the pelagic component, the nearshore, and the lingering oil. In the near future, we're going to be reorganizing a little bit in that the herring research and monitoring is expected to be treated as a component within the Gulf Watch Alaska instead of a separate program as it is now. So we are monitoring all trophic levels at both inshore and offshore stations. Here are all the different projects that are under the current Gulf Watch Alaska program, and highlighted in yellow are those that are occurring here in Prince William Sound. So at the lowest trophic levels, the environmental drivers, Rob Campbell from Prince William Sound Science Center is doing oceanography. There's killer whale. Actually, you should start small and go big, I guess. Forage fish are being collected by vessel, and so the aircraft that's doing forage fish surveys is working with the boat that's doing forage fish surveys, because we each see something different. The boat can't work as shallow as the fish that we see in the airplane, and the airplane can't see nearly as deep as the boat can using their acoustics. There's both summer and winter bird surveys, because the bird populations change quite a bit between summer and winter, so tracking both of those. The killer whales and humpback whales as our top predators. Then going near shore, so this is once you're at the beach, looking at the same type of things as the pelagic, where you're looking at your primary producers, your prey, and your predators. There's also a component that's for lingering oil monitoring, and that occurs about every 5 years. We're trying to get out and just reassess the status of oil that remains within the beaches. Give you a feel for the scope of what's being covered by the program. Green dots are places that they're doing physical oceanography. Red dots are where they're doing the nearshore environment work. The yellow area is where they're doing watching orcas and killer whales. Prince William Sound is also where they're doing all the humpback whales. The bird surveys are occurring in here. This red spaghetti diagram is the birds at Middleton Island that they're tracking the diet using birds as a collector of forage fish. This shows a map of where those birds fly and the areas that they're occupying. One of the other large long-term monitoring programs that's going on is the Gulf Watch, or the long-term ecological research program funded by NSF, and it adds more physical oceanography here a little bit further to the east outside the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council area of interest. Just to give you an idea of some of the results, here's environmental drivers, Rob Campbell. If you made his presentation last year, you may have seen this showing the temperature anomaly. So if it's red, it's warmer than average, blue is colder than average, showing that these recent years, very warm water and a long-term trend for increasing temperature. Nearshore ecosystem, here looking at the clams in the 4 different areas: Katmai, Kachemak Bay, Kenai Fjords, and Western Prince William Sound, showing what's happening with them, general downward trend. Middleton Island, using the birds as a sampling, you see that they like sand lance, but there was definitely a time period where those were not as abundant. Capelin like colder water, so they have not been in abundance recently. There has been a bit of a shift in their diet towards Pacific herring. Some of the changes in the birds, both monitoring in Prince William Sound and out in the outer coast, look at shifts in seabird distribution under different temperature regimes in both the spring and the fall. And here is where they were seeing most of their MERS in both the cold years and warm years, spring and fall. Going up to killer whales, monitoring the different pods that are occurred. Both the AB and the AT1 pods were ones that were known to have swum through the Exxon Valdez oil spill. The AB pod, they both declined rapidly afterwards. The AB pod has been slowly climbing back up. The AT pod has declined, and they no longer have viable females, so that pod will eventually go extinct. Humpback whales. If you're out looking for whales, you may have noticed in recent years there's not a lot of whales out there. From 2008 into 2014, there was a fairly large population. Once the waters got warm, a lot of things happened. There was a decline in herring, a lot of other die-offs, and the whales seem to have moved out of this area. And like this spring, we saw very few in with the herring. So tracking their numbers. And here's lingering oil, just to give you an idea. We didn't get out to do a survey in 2020 because of the COVID concerns, and we're looking at 2025. So trying to map what the oil is, where the oil is, and how it's degrading over time. One of the important things is to make that information available. Scientists have a way to share it, but more important, how do everyone else get to it? The easiest way is to go through the Alaska Ocean Observing System, this www.aoos.org, and look through their data portal, and you'll be able to search for any of the types of data that you might want and pull that stuff up. You can also go through the website, which is the gulfwatchalaska.org. So another way into the data is there. With that, I'd like to go to the final poll, and that's just, what type of information are you likely to want to find? Do you want to know more about the physical ocean, physical chemical oceanography, the pelagic system, herring, nearshore, or lingering oil?
Hey Scott, does
Yeah.
pelagic mean deep sea or something like that? I know that word from seabirds, but I don't know what it means all by itself.
Yeah, it does. It means everything that's basically offshore. So if you're off the beach, we're going to treat it as being pelagic, as in the water. As a physical oceanographer, it warms my heart to see how many people are interested in environmental drivers. It's one of those where we always seem to lose out to the charismatic megafauna. And so I'm glad that a lot of people are curious about the base of the ecosystem. We'll definitely have to let Mandy know that there's a lot of people interested in more information on lingering oil, and maybe get her to do a presentation at a future event so that you can hear about the status of the oil. With that, I think if you want to continue answering, that'd be great. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Scott, this is Paul. We got a bunch of questions for you.
Okay.
Let's see. How are wild and enhanced salmon interacting with one another? Any ideas?
So the big question is, some of the hatchery salmon are going to end up in streams, so what we call straying. And so is the genetics of the hatchery fish different from the wild fish? And in that sense, reduce the viability of the offspring of a wild hatchery mix. And there are differences in the genetic structure and the viability. There was a paper fairly recently that came out that discussed how the salmon that come from hatchery parents in the stream don't fare as well as ones that come from wild parents in the stream.
And enhanced salmon are just the hatchery salmon, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let's see, another question. Are herring not returning due to oil still showing up in the sound? So is there any relationship oil in the beaches and the herring? Second part of the question, are they more sensitive to residue from the spill?
We do not think that the lingering oil is having an effect. The lingering oil is in locations away from the spawning grounds where the fish are most sensitive to oil. There's just no evidence that there's enough of the oil coming out into the water column to think that it's affecting the fish themselves. Disease definitely appears to be a big issue along with the physical oceanography. And, a lot of things changed in the late 70s, and we got a lot of flatfish moving into the area. And so the whole ecosystem changed, and it made it a lot harder for smaller forage species.
Great, thanks. Going down the questions here is aging by scale common for all species or specifically herring?
Yeah, it's they have done comparisons of scales to otoliths. The aging accuracy is the same for both, and so if the accuracy is going to be the same, you go with the easiest one to do the sampling with.
Great. Let's see. This is one is that the Forest Service is conducting a survey with Kittlets and Meerlets, or the Fish and Wildlife Service, maybe is what it meant. Is that in partnership with the stewards, with the anybody that you know of? Anything about that study?
I don't particularly know about that study, but I'm sure the people who are doing seabird work are well aware of it. A lot of the people who are doing the monitoring for the Gulf Watch Alaska program are the same people who would be doing those surveys. They may just be funded as a separate project.
Yeah, and at 3 o'clock, we have a talk about the marine birds of Prince William Sound, Alaska. So that's with Rob Kaler, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And so he might be able to answer that question at 3 o'clock.
Yeah, and he's one of the Gulf Watch Alaska PIs as well.
Right. And a similar comment, are there different shorebirds showing up?
Oh, that one I have.
Yeah.
I have no information on shorebirds.
Yeah, great. All right, well, that about wraps us up for this this session. Thanks, Scott. We'll be taking a 10-minute break and be back at 10:35 with a talk on management of public and private lands in Prince William Sound with Josie Hickel, who's with the Executive Vice President of Anson Community Affairs with Chugach Alaska Corporation, Jack Blackwell, Alaska State Park Superintendent in Kenai and Prince William Sound region, and Tim Lyden with the Glacier Ranger District Wilderness Manager of the Chugach National Forest. So for the those speakers, you need to go and drop down and join that next session. For everybody else, just hang tight. We put, if you've missed it, we've Betsy's put in the link to the our video about the Prince William Sound Stewardship Foundation by William Melton. So we'll have a little moment to get up and stretch and get a cup of your favorite beverage and maybe step outside, get a little sunshine. And then we'll be back at 10:35.